She's dying in labor with triplets, but the billionaire CEO father is marrying his mistress downstairs. Part 2. The grand ballroom of the Hawthorne Grand Hotel had never been so silent. 500 of Manhattan's elite sat frozen in their chairs, champagne glasses halfway to their lips, staring at the woman covered in blood who had just shattered the wedding of the decade. Alexander Hawthorne stood at the head table in his perfect tuxedo, his boutonniere still pinned to his lapel, his new wife Victoria beside him in her $50,000 wedding gown. The life he had chosen, elegant, uncomplicated, profitable, spread out before him like a magazine photograph. 23 floors above them, the woman who carried his children was dying. Alexander. Maria's voice cracked with desperation. The paramedics are waiting. Sophia needs emergency surgery right now, and the babies, your babies, are fighting for their lives. They need their father. The silence stretched like a taut wire. Every eye in the ballroom was on Alexander, watching to see what kind of man he truly was when stripped of his carefully crafted image. Victoria's hand tightened on his arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his jacket. Alexander, she whispered, so quietly only he could hear. Think about what you're doing. Think about everything we've built together. But for the first time in months, Alexander wasn't thinking about business deals or social status or the perfect life he'd constructed. He was thinking about 3 tiny babies who had just entered the world without their father, and the woman who had nearly died bringing them into existence. How bad is it? He asked Maria, his voice hoarse. She's lost a lot of blood. The babies are premature, 36 weeks. They're breathing, but barely. The smallest one. Maria's voice broke. Alexander, they need you. Right now. Alexander looked around the ballroom one more time. At Victoria, whose face had gone from bridal radiance to cold calculation. At the 500 guests who represented every connection that had built his empire. At the photographer still capturing every moment of his humiliation. At the orchestra frozen with their instruments raised. Then he looked back at Maria, covered in his children's blood, begging him to choose love over image. Victoria, he said quietly, turning to his new wife. I have to go. Alexander, no. You can't leave our wedding reception. Think about what this will do to our reputation, to the business partnership. My children are dying. They're not your responsibility right now. You have other responsibilities. To me. To our guests. To the future we've planned. The words hit Alexander like a physical blow. In that moment, he saw Victoria clearly for the first time, not as the elegant partner who understood his ambitions, but as a woman who viewed his children as obstacles to be managed rather than lives to be cherished. They're my children, he said, his voice growing stronger. They will always be my responsibility. He pulled off his wedding ring, the symbol of the life he'd thought he wanted, and set it on the table beside his untouched champagne. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced to the stunned ballroom, his voice carrying clearly in the silence. I apologize for the disruption, but I have to leave. My children are being born, and their mother needs medical attention. A murmur rippled through the crowd, shock, gossip, the sound of a reputation crumbling in real time. Victoria grabbed his arm as he moved toward the exit. If you walk out of here, Alexander, don't think you can come back. Don't think you can salvage this marriage or this partnership. I understand. Do you? Do you understand that you're throwing away everything? The Ashford investment, the global expansion, your entire future. I'm choosing my future, Alexander replied. For the first time in months, I'm choosing what actually matters. He followed Maria toward the ballroom doors, leaving behind his bride, his reception, and the life he'd built on choosing image over integrity. Behind him, Victoria's voice rose above the murmur of shocked guests. This is what you get for marrying beneath your station. This is exactly why old families don't associate with new money. Alexander paused at the doorway, her words confirming everything he was just beginning to understand about the woman he'd married and the world he'd been trying so desperately to join. Then he stepped into the elevator with Maria and rose toward the penthouse where his real life was waiting. The scene in the penthouse was controlled chaos. Paramedics worked frantically to stabilize Sophia for transport, while 3 tiny babies lay in makeshift incubators, their breathing monitored by portable equipment. Alexander burst through the door still wearing his tuxedo, the sight of his formal wedding attire a stark contrast to the medical emergency, surrounding his family. "Oh my God," he whispered, seeing Sophia pale and barely conscious on the stretcher. "Is she?" "She's alive, but critical," the lead paramedic, a woman named Jennifer Santos, told him without looking up from her work. "Severe hemorrhaging, possible retained placenta. We need to get her to surgery immediately." Alexander moved to the three babies, seeing his children for the first time. They were impossibly small, their skin translucent, their breathing rapid and shallow. Monitoring wires attached to their tiny bodies tracked heart rates that seemed too fast, too fragile. Are they going to be okay? 36 weeks is premature, but viable. However, they're showing signs of respiratory distress. The smallest one, she gestured to a baby boy who couldn't have weighed more than 4 pounds, is having the most difficulty. What do they need? Immediate NICU care, possible ventilator support, and sir, we need your consent for several emergency procedures. Jennifer handed him a clipboard of medical forms while continuing to work on Sophia's 4 lines. For the mother, we may need to perform emergency surgery to stop the bleeding. For the babies, they may need intubation, feeding tubes, or other interventions to support their breathing and nutrition. Alexander signed frantically, his formal training taking over even as his emotional world collapsed. Whatever they need. Cost is no object. This isn't about cost, Mr. Hawthorne. This is about time. We need to move now. As the paramedics prepared everyone for transport, Sophia's eyes fluttered open. She looked directly at Alexander, taking in his wedding attire with confusion and pain. "You came," she whispered. "Of course I came. But your wedding is over. You and the babies are what matter now." Tears leaked from the corners of her eyes. I'm sorry they came early. I tried to wait. Don't apologize. You have nothing to be sorry for." "Alexander, if something happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you. But if it does, promise me you'll take care of them. Really take care of them. Not just provide for them, but be their father. I promise. Promise me you won't let them grow up thinking their mother didn't love them. Sophia, you're going to tell them yourself how much you love them. Promise me. I promise." As they loaded Sophia onto the stretcher, she lost consciousness again. The 3 babies were placed in specialized transport incubators, their tiny forms dwarfed by the medical equipment keeping them alive. "Are you riding with us?" Jennifer asked as they moved toward the elevator. Alexander looked down at his wedding tuxedo, at the boutonniere that Victoria had pinned to his lapel that morning when the world had seemed so different. "Yes, I'm riding with my family." The emergency department at Mount Sinai Hospital erupted into controlled chaos as the ambulance arrived. Sophia was rushed directly into surgery while the triplets were taken to the neonatal intensive care unit. Alexander found himself standing in a hospital corridor, still in his formal wear, feeling completely helpless as medical teams fought to save the 4 most important people in his world. "Mr. Hawthorne?" Dr. Sarah Chun, Sophia's obstetrician who had been called in for the emergency, approached him with a grim expression. "I need to speak with you about Sophia's condition. How bad is it?" "She's experiencing postpartum hemorrhaging, likely caused by uterine atony. The uterus isn't contracting properly after delivery. With triplets, this is a known risk, but it's become life-threatening. What are you doing to help her?" "We've taken her into emergency surgery to try to stop the bleeding. Dr. Morrison is performing a procedure to remove any retained placental tissue and repair any tears from the rapid delivery. Will she survive? We're doing everything we can. The next few hours are critical." Dr. Chin studied Alexander's wedding attire with a mixture of confusion and judgment. "Mr. Hawthorne, I have to ask, why weren't you present for the delivery?" Sophia was in active labor for over 3 hours. The question hit him like a physical blow. How could he explain that he'd been exchanging vows with another woman while Sophia fought for her life? I was unavailable." "Unavailable? Your partner was delivering triplets alone, and you were unavailable?" "I made a terrible mistake." "Yes, you did. Sophia nearly died today, and those babies are fighting for their lives because they were born without medical supervision. If Maria hadn't been there, I know I failed them." Dr. Chin's expression softened slightly. "The question now is what you're going to do going forward. Sophia is going to need extensive recovery time. The babies will likely be in the NICU for weeks. This family needs support, not abandonment." "I'm not going anywhere." "Good. Because those children deserve better than what they got today. As Dr. Chun returned to surgery, Alexander was approached by Dr. Patricia Williams, the head of the NICU. "Mr. Hawthorne, I need to update you on your children's condition. Please. Baby A, your daughter, is the strongest of the three. She's breathing on her own and her vital signs are stable. We're monitoring her closely, but she's doing well. And the boys? Baby B is having some respiratory difficulties. We've placed him on a ventilator to support his breathing while his lungs continue to develop. And baby C?" Dr. Williams hesitated. "Baby C is our biggest concern. He's significantly smaller than his siblings, and he's experiencing severe respiratory distress. We've had to intubate him, and his oxygen levels are still dangerously low." "What does that mean?" "It means the next 72 hours are critical. If his condition doesn't improve, we may need to consider more aggressive interventions. Whatever it takes. Money is no object. This isn't about money, Mr. Hawthorne. This is about 3 very small babies who were born prematurely fighting to survive their first days of life." Alexander felt the weight of his choices crashing down on him. While he'd been focused on wedding planning and business deals, these 3 lives had been developing inside Sophia, depending on him to be present for their arrival. Instead, they'd come into the world without their father, in an emergency that could have been prevented with proper medical supervision. "Can I see them?" "Of course, but I need to prepare you. They're very small, and there are a lot of machines. It can be overwhelming." Dr. Williams led him into the NICU, a room filled with high-tech incubators, monitors, and the soft beeping of life support equipment. She stopped in front of 3 isolettes arranged side by side. "These are your children." Alexander stared at the 3 tiny forms in their plastic wombs, overwhelmed by emotions he couldn't name. They were so small, so fragile, covered in wires and tubes that looked enormous against their miniature bodies. "They're beautiful," he whispered. "They are. And they're fighters. But Mr. Hawthorne, I need you to understand something. These babies are going to need their parents, both of their parents, to be fully present for the next several months. NICU babies require constant attention, medical appointments, specialized care. I understand. Do you? Because being a NICU parent means putting everything else in your life second. Work, social obligations, everything takes a back seat to these children's needs. I'm ready for that. Are you? Because 3 hours ago you were getting married to someone else instead of being here for their birth." The accusation hung in the air like a condemnation. Alexander looked at his children, his daughter breathing steadily in her incubator, his first son connected to a ventilator, his youngest son fighting for every breath, and felt shame like he'd never experienced. I was wrong. I was completely, catastrophically wrong about my priorities. Words are easy, Mr. Hawthorne. Actions are what matter. Then judge me by my actions going forward. Dr. Williams studied his face, perhaps looking for sincerity or commitment. Your children's mother is one of the strongest women I've ever met. She delivered 3 babies alone, in circumstances that could have killed all 4 of them, and her first concern when the paramedics arrived was their well-being, not her own. I know. She deserves a partner who matches that level of dedication. She deserves better than she got from me. Yes, she does. The question is whether you're capable of becoming the man she and these children deserve. Alexander looked at his 3 children, so small and vulnerable, fighting for their lives while he stood helpless in his wedding tuxedo. I have to be. If you're feeling the weight of Alexander's realization and the fight for these 4 lives, hit that like button. The medical crisis is just the beginning. Wait until you see how his abandonment of the wedding affects his business empire and what Victoria's true plan really was. Make sure you're subscribed because the next part will reveal twists that will leave you speechless. While Alexander sat vigil in the NICU, watching his children fight for their lives, the outside world was exploding with news of his wedding day disaster. By 6 p.m., less than 6 hours after Maria had burst into the ballroom, #WeddingGate scandal was trending worldwide on social media. Videos taken by wedding guests on their phones showed the exact moment Maria announced that Sophia was giving birth, Alexander's stunned reaction, and his ultimate choice to abandon his bride at the altar. Billionaire CEO abandons bride to rush to baby mama, read one headline. Manhattan's most eligible bachelor chooses baby drama over society wedding, declared another. The wedding of the decade becomes the scandal of the century. But it was the society bloggers who really drove the knife in, dissecting every detail of Alexander's personal life with the ruthless precision of seasoned gossip professionals. Sources close to the Ashford family confirm that Victoria is absolutely devastated by Alexander Hawthorne's public humiliation. The bride, still in her wedding gown, was reportedly seen leaving the Hawthorne Grand Hotel with her family, vowing never to speak to the real estate mogul again. But perhaps the most shocking detail of this scandalous affair: Hawthorne set up his pregnant ex-girlfriend in the penthouse of the same hotel where he was marrying his society bride. While 500 elite guests celebrated downstairs, Sophia Martinez was giving birth to triplets alone, 23 floors above them. This level of callousness is breathtaking even by Manhattan real estate standards. Alexander's phone had been buzzing constantly since he'd arrived at the hospital, but he'd turned it off to focus on his family. Maria, however, had been monitoring the media coverage from the hospital waiting room. "Alexander," she said, approaching him in the NICU where he sat beside his youngest son's incubator. "You need to see this." She handed him her phone, showing him the social media explosion surrounding his story. "It's everywhere. Every major news outlet, every social media platform. The video of you leaving the wedding has been viewed 15 million times." Alexander scrolled through the coverage, watching his reputation and carefully crafted image crumble in real time. "There's more," Maria continued grimly. "Business reporters are saying your investors are spooked. Something about character concerns and personal instability affecting business judgment." "What are they reporting exactly?" "That a man who would abandon his wedding to his business partner's daughter might not be trustworthy with investor money. That someone who would set up his pregnant girlfriend in the same building where he's marrying someone else shows sociopathic levels of compartmentalization." Alexander looked at his son, so tiny and fragile in the incubator, and realized that his obsession with image and success had not only nearly cost him his family, it was about to cost him his empire as well. "There's something else," Maria said quietly. Victoria gave an interview to Page 6. "What did she say?" Maria hesitated, then pulled up the article on her phone. "Alexander Hawthorne showed his true character today. He's a man who will abandon his commitments the moment something more convenient comes along. I'm grateful I discovered this before we built a life together." But she also said this: "The Ashford family investment in Hawthorne Enterprises was contingent on this marriage and the stability it represented. Obviously, that partnership is no longer viable." The words hit Alexander like a physical blow. The $2 billion investment that was supposed to fund his global expansion, the entire reason he'd convinced himself to marry Victoria, was gone. "So I lost everything anyway." "Not everything," Maria said gently, gesturing toward the 3 incubators. "You chose the only things that actually matter. Did I? Or did I just destroy my ability to provide for them?" "Alexander, Sophia doesn't need you to be a billionaire. She needs you to be a father. Easy to say when you're not facing bankruptcy. Are you facing bankruptcy?" Alexander realized he didn't actually know the answer to that question. His business was leveraged heavily against the promise of the Ashford investment. Without that capital infusion, he might not be able to meet his current obligations. "I need to make some calls. Later. Right now, your son's oxygen levels are improving. The doctors think he's turned a corner." Alexander looked at baby C, his smallest, most fragile child, and saw that his color was indeed better. The monitors showed steadier heart rate, improved oxygen saturation. "He's going to be okay?" Dr. Williams thinks so. All 3 of them are fighters. Like their mother. Like their mother. For the first time in hours, Alexander felt a flicker of hope. His children were going to survive. His reputation might be in ruins. His business might be collapsing. His marriage might be over before it began. But his children were going to live. It was enough. It had to be enough. At 10 p.m., while Alexander maintained his vigil in the NICU, Victoria Ashford sat in her family's Park Avenue penthouse, still wearing her wedding gown, planning her next move. "The humiliation was perfect," she told her father, Winston Ashford III, as she sipped champagne from a crystal flute. "Better than we could have orchestrated ourselves." "You're certain he'll be financially vulnerable now?" "Absolutely. Without our investment, Hawthorne Enterprises is over-leveraged by at least $300 million. He's been living on credit and promises, assuming our capital would cover his expansion costs. And now? Now he defaults on several major loans within 90 days. His creditors will demand immediate payment, and he won't have the liquidity to cover them. Winston smiled coldly. At which point we sweep in and acquire his properties at bankruptcy prices. For approximately 20 cents on the dollar. The Hawthorne Grand Hotel alone is worth $400 million. We'll probably get it for $80 million in bankruptcy court. You've done well, Victoria. Though I admit, I'm surprised you were willing to actually marry him. I wasn't. The plan was always to destroy him at the altar. I just didn't expect his pregnant girlfriend to do the work for us. Victoria stood and walked to the window overlooking Central Park, still in her elaborate wedding gown. Alexander Hawthorne thought he was so clever, using our family connections to advance his little empire. He never realized we were using him to acquire his assets. What about the emotional component? Did you develop feelings for him during the seduction? Please. Alexander is handsome and successful, but he's also weak. Any man who would abandon his pregnant girlfriend for business connections isn't worthy of genuine affection. Yet you convinced him you loved him. I convinced him I understood his ambitions. Men like Alexander don't want love, they want validation. They want someone who makes them feel important and successful. And the pregnant woman? What's your read on her? Victoria considered the question. Sofia Martinez is exactly what she appears to be, a sincere, caring woman who genuinely loved Alexander despite his flaws. She'll be better off without him. You almost sound like you respect her. I do respect her. She had the courage to build a real relationship, while I was just playing a game. The difference is, my game was more profitable. Winston raised his champagne glass. To the fall of Alexander Hawthorne. To the rise of Ashford Properties, Victoria corrected. Within 6 months, we'll own every significant property in his portfolio. And what will you tell people about the wedding disaster? That I dodged a bullet. That Alexander Hawthorne's true character was revealed just in time to save me from a disastrous marriage. The media is painting you as the victim. Because I am the victim. I'm the innocent society bride who was publicly humiliated by an unstable businessman with poor judgment and questionable character. Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from her publicist. Entertainment Tonight wants an exclusive interview about the wedding disaster. They're offering 7 figures. Perfect, she murmured. I'll play the heartbroken bride while Alexander's empire crumbles. By the time I'm finished with the media tour, no investor in the world will trust him with their money. Ruthless, Winston observed approvingly. Effective. Alexander thought he was playing in the big leagues, but he was still thinking like a boy from Queens. In our world, business is war, and love is just another weapon. As Victoria planned her media strategy to complete Alexander's destruction, 20 blocks away, the man she'd manipulated and betrayed sat beside his newborn son's incubator, learning what love actually meant. At 2 a.m., the NICU was quiet except for the soft beeping of monitors and the gentle whoosh of ventilators. Alexander sat in an uncomfortable chair beside his children's incubators, still wearing his wedding tuxedo though he'd removed the jacket and loosened his tie. He'd been there for 8 hours straight, watching his 3 children fight for their lives, learning their rhythms and responses. Baby A, his daughter, had been the most stable all day. Baby B had been weaned off the ventilator and was breathing on his own. Baby C, his smallest son, had turned the corner around midnight and was finally maintaining steady oxygen levels. Mr. Hawthorne? A young nurse named Kelly approached him quietly. Visiting hours ended 6 hours ago. You don't have to stay here all night. I want to stay. Have you eaten anything today? Alexander realized he couldn't remember his last meal. The wedding reception had been interrupted before dinner was served, and he'd been too focused on his children to think about food. I'm not hungry. You need to take care of yourself too. Your children are going to need you healthy and strong. Are they going to be okay? Really okay? Kelly checked the monitors on all 3 incubators before answering. Their vital signs have been steadily improving all evening. Barring any unexpected complications, I think they're going to be fine. Premature, but fine. When can I hold them? Probably in a day or 2, once they're more stable. Dr. Williams will make that determination. And their mother? Any word from surgery? Surgery finished 3 hours ago. Dr. Chun was able to stop the bleeding and repair the damage from the rapid delivery. Sophia is stable and recovering. Relief flooded through Alexander so powerfully that he had to grip the arms of his chair. Can I see her? She's still unconscious from the anesthesia, but yes. Room 412. Alexander looked at his 3 children one more time, memorizing their tiny faces, their steady breathing, their small fists clenched in sleep. I'll be back in a few minutes, he whispered to them. Daddy's going to check on Mommy. The words felt foreign on his tongue, Daddy, Mommy, but also right in a way that surprised him. He found Sophia's room and stood in the doorway, seeing her pale and still in the hospital bed, for lines running into her arms, monitors tracking her vital signs. She looked fragile, exhausted, but alive. She's sleeping, said Maria, who was sitting in a chair beside the bed. Doctor says she'll probably wake up in a few hours. How is she? Lucky to be alive. The doctor said if the delivery had taken much longer, if the blood loss had been any more severe. But she's going to be okay? Physically, yes. Emotionally, Maria shrugged. That depends on you. Alexander pulled a chair close to Sophia's bedside and sat down heavily. I don't know how to apologize for what I did today. Start with understanding what you did. I abandoned her when she needed me most. You abandoned all of them. While they were fighting for their lives, you were celebrating your new marriage. I know. Do you? Do you understand that Sophia could have died today? That your children could have died? All because you weren't there? Maria, do you understand that she delivered 3 babies alone? That she was terrified and in agony and calling your name while you were exchanging vows with another woman? Each word was a knife to his conscience, but Alexander forced himself to listen. Do you understand that your youngest son stopped breathing for almost a minute, and I had to perform CPR on a newborn baby because their father was too busy getting married to be present for their birth? Oh God. So before you start apologizing, make sure you understand exactly what you're apologizing for. Alexander looked at Sophia's sleeping form, and for the first time, he truly grasped the magnitude of his betrayal. Not just the affair, not just the wedding, but the complete abandonment of the woman carrying his children during the most vulnerable and dangerous moment of her life. I almost killed them all, he whispered. Yes, you did. How do I make this right? I don't know if you can. But you can start by being the father those children deserve from this moment forward. And Sophia? Sophia will decide for herself whether she can ever forgive you. But Alexander, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean going back to the way things were. I know. Do you? Because you can't charm your way out of this. You can't buy your way out of this. You can't manipulate or negotiate your way back into her heart. Then what can I do? You can prove that you've changed. Every day, for as long as it takes. Sophia stirred in the bed, her eyes fluttering open. When she saw Alexander sitting beside her, she looked confused, as if trying to place him in the context of everything that had happened. You're still here, she said softly. I'm not going anywhere. What about Victoria? What about your wedding? There is no wedding. There is no Victoria. There's only you and our children. Alexander, I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness. I know I failed you in the worst possible way. But Sophia, I swear to you, I will spend the rest of my life trying to be the man you and our children deserve. Sophia studied his face, seeing something different than the man who had left her 6 weeks ago to marry another woman. What changed? I saw them, our children, fighting for their lives while I was playing dress-up in a ballroom. I realized that everything I thought mattered, the business, the reputation, the social connections, none of it means anything if I lose the only people who actually love me. Do they? Do we still love you? I don't know, but I'm going to find out. This is just the beginning of Alexander's reckoning. If you're feeling the emotional intensity of this family crisis and want to see how much deeper this story goes, smash that like button and stay subscribed. The next part will reveal the full extent of Victoria's manipulation, the collapse of Alexander's empire, and whether love can truly overcome the ultimate betrayal. This redemption story is about to get even more powerful. 48 hours later, Alexander's phone had been ringing nonstop since he'd turned it back on. Investors, creditors, business partners, and reporters all demanding answers about the wedding scandal and what it meant for Hawthorne Enterprises. He sat in the hospital cafeteria at 6 a.m., 2 days after his children's birth, trying to understand the financial devastation that was unfolding while his family recovered upstairs. The coffee was terrible, the fluorescent lights gave everything a sickly pallor, and the scattered newspapers on nearby tables all featured variations of the same headline: Billionaire's Wedding Day Disaster. "Alexander, thank God you answered," came the voice of his CFO, Michael Torres, when he finally took a call. "We have a serious problem." "How serious?" "Catastrophic. The Ashford investment withdrawal triggered a cascade of covenant breaches on our existing loans. We have 14 days to come up with $280 million or the banks start seizing properties." Alexander felt his stomach drop. He'd known the Ashford money was crucial, but he hadn't understood how exposed his entire empire was without it. "What about our other investors?" "Spooked. The media coverage has convinced them you're unstable. Harrison Financial pulled their commitment yesterday morning. That's 40 million gone. Steinberg Group followed suit 2 hours later, another 60 million. This morning, Pacific Holdings and Meridian Capital both sent termination letters." Jesus, how much total? "We've lost commitments totaling $180 million in 48 hours. Plus the $250 million from Ashford. We're facing a $430 million hole in our financing. Our liquid assets, $30 million. Enough to operate for about 6 weeks. Nowhere near enough to cover the debt service." Alexander stared at the numbers Michael was rattling off, watching 20 years of work reduced to mathematics that didn't add up. Each figure represented years of negotiation, relationship building, careful financial engineering, all of it evaporating because he'd chosen to leave his wedding reception. The Tokyo expansion? Dead. Without the Ashford connections, the Japanese investors won't return our calls. The European hotels? London deal collapsed yesterday. Berlin and Paris are wavering. Christ. Options. Emergency bankruptcy filing to stop foreclosure proceedings. Liquidation of non-essential properties. Or what? Find $250 million in the next 2 weeks. From where? You just told me we've lost every major investor. I don't know. Alexander, I've never seen anything like this. I've been doing corporate finance for 25 years, and I've never seen a business empire collapse this quickly over a personal scandal. The words sent a chill through Alexander. What do you mean exactly? The timing of the investor withdrawals, the coordinated media campaign, the way the story is being spun in the financial press, it feels intentional. Like someone orchestrated this collapse. Who would do that? Someone who wanted to acquire your properties at bankruptcy prices. Someone with the connections to coordinate investor withdrawals and media coverage. As Michael continued explaining the mechanics of Alexander's financial destruction, a terrible understanding began to dawn. This wasn't just the natural consequence of a public scandal. This was a deliberate campaign of destruction. Michael, pull together everything you can about the investor withdrawals. Timeline, communication patterns, who called who and when. I need to understand if this was coordinated. You think someone planned this? I think someone played me from the beginning. Alexander ended the call and sat staring at his coffee, understanding for the first time that he hadn't just lost Victoria's investment. He'd been the target of a sophisticated financial assassination. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Meet me at the Ashford Building, 47th floor, 2 p.m. We need to discuss your situation." Victoria, at exactly 2 p.m., Alexander walked into the executive offices of Ashford Properties. The contrast with his own former offices was stark. Where Hawthorne Enterprises had been modern and aggressive, Ashford Properties exuded old money elegance. Persian rugs, oil paintings of long-dead patriarchs, furniture that had probably been in the family for generations. He looked exhausted, unshaven, still wearing the same clothes he'd had on for 3 days. He looked exactly how Victoria had wanted him to look, defeated, desperate, and completely at her mercy. She was waiting in her father's conference room, no longer the blushing bride, but the calculating businesswoman she'd always been. Her wedding dress had been replaced by a sharp Armani power suit. Her romantic facade dropped entirely. She looked like what she was, a predator who had successfully hunted her prey. "Alexander, you look terrible. I feel worse. What do you want, Victoria? I want to offer you a way out of the financial nightmare you're facing." "In exchange for what?" "Your complete property portfolio. Every building, every asset, every development project." Alexander laughed bitterly. "For how much?" $80 million. Cash. Today, my portfolio is worth over 800 million. Was worth 800 million. Today it's worth whatever someone is willing to pay for it. And in about 10 days, when your loans default, it'll be worth whatever the bankruptcy court decides, which you estimate to be 20 cents on the dollar. Maybe less, depending on how ugly the media coverage gets. Alexander studied Victoria's face, seeing clearly for the first time the cold calculation that had always been there beneath the romantic mask. This was all planned, wasn't it? The seduction, the affair, the wedding, the investment offer. Victoria smiled, and for the first time, Alexander saw her without any pretense. It was like watching a beautiful mask fall away to reveal something sharp and predatory underneath. Of course it was planned. Did you really think the Ashford family would partner with some upstart from Queens? We don't make partnerships, Alexander. We make acquisitions. So everything was a lie? Every conversation, every intimate moment, every promise about our future together. Not everything. You really are handsome. And your business instincts aren't terrible for someone who started with nothing. Under different circumstances, I might have actually enjoyed sleeping with you. The casual cruelty of the statement hit Alexander like a physical blow. But you never intended to marry me. God, no. Though I admit, your girlfriend's timing was perfect. Saved me from having to find another way to humiliate you publicly. Victoria walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, her heels clicking on the marble floor. She gestured to the cityscape below with the casual ownership of someone whose family had been shaping the city for generations. See that building there? The one with the blue glass facade? Ashford Properties acquired it in 1987 when the previous owner overextended himself trying to compete with us. And that one, the Granite Tower? We bought it in 1995 under similar circumstances. You make a habit of destroying competitors? We make a habit of maintaining order. You see, Alexander, men like you don't understand how this city really works. Enlighten me. Manhattan real estate isn't just about supply and demand. It's about networks, relationships, families that have been here for generations. You can't just show up with a few good ideas and expect to claim territory that's been managed by established interests for decades. Established interests like your family. Among others, the Ashfords, the Whitneys, the Delacroix. We've been developing this city since before your grandparents immigrated here. We understand something you never learned, which is that true power isn't about building something new. It's about controlling what already exists. Victoria turned from the window, her expression almost pitying. You thought you were a real estate mogul, but you were really just a talented contractor who got lucky with financing. The moment you tried to expand beyond your natural station, you became a threat that needed to be neutralized. So you decided to destroy me. We decided to bring you back down to size. The Tokyo expansion, the European hotels, you were threatening markets that have been managed by our network for generations. Your father's interests, my father's interests, our family's interests, our investors' interests. When you started talking about a global empire, when you started positioning yourself as the next great Manhattan real estate dynasty, you became a problem that required a solution. Alexander felt a rage building in his chest, but also a strange sense of relief. The woman he'd thought he loved, the life he'd thought he wanted, it had all been an elaborate business strategy. So you seduced me to destroy my business. I exploited your weakness to neutralize a competitive threat. There's a difference. My weakness. Your desperate need to be accepted by people who will never accept you. Your willingness to abandon everything real for something fake. Victoria moved closer, her voice taking on an almost educational tone, as if she were explaining basic mathematics to a slow child. Alexander, did you really think a woman like me would be attracted to a man like you? Did you think our families moved in the same circles, shared the same values, wanted the same things? I thought we understood each other. We do understand each other. I understand that you're a climber who will sacrifice anything for status. You understand that I'm a weapon designed to destroy climbers. And Sophia? What about her in your little game? Victoria's expression shifted slightly, perhaps the first genuine emotion Alexander had seen from her. Sophia Martinez is a genuine, caring woman who deserved better than you. Though I suppose she's getting better now. What do you mean? I mean that losing you might be the best thing that ever happened to her. Now she can raise those children without having to compete with your ego for their father's attention. The words hit Alexander like physical blows, but he realized Victoria was right. Sophia was better without him. His children would be better raised by their mother alone than by a father who prioritized business over family. The 80 million, he said quietly. What are the terms? Complete transfer of all properties and assets. You sign over everything, the hotels, the office buildings, the development projects, even your personal assets beyond basic living expenses. You walk away with enough money to start over somewhere else. And if I refuse, then you take your chances with bankruptcy court. Your creditors will seize everything anyway. You'll walk away with nothing, and I'll still end up with your properties, just at an even lower price. Victoria returned to her seat behind the conference table, pulling out a thick stack of legal documents. I had my lawyers prepare the paperwork. Everything's ready for your signature. You were that confident I'd accept. I was that confident you'd have no choice. Alexander looked at the documents, the legal death certificate of everything he'd built over 20 years. But as he stared at the papers, he realized something unexpected. He felt relieved. The empire that was about to be taken from him had already cost him everything that actually mattered. His relationship with Sophia, his presence during his children's birth, his integrity as a man, all sacrificed on the altar of business success that had turned out to be an illusion anyway. You know what's funny, Victoria? What? A week ago, I would have done anything to save my business. I would have mortgaged my soul to keep the empire intact. And now? Now I'm realizing that my empire was already mortgaged. To people like you, to investors who could withdraw support on a whim, to a lifestyle that required me to choose image over integrity. So you'll sign? I'll consider it. But first, I want to understand something. What? How long have you been planning this? How far back does the strategy go? Victoria smiled, clearly enjoying the opportunity to reveal the full scope of her manipulation. We identified you as a potential threat 18 months ago, when you started talking publicly about global expansion. My father had me research your background, your business practices, your personal life. And you discovered that you were ambitious but insecure, successful but desperate for validation from old money families, in love with a woman who represented everything you were trying to escape from. Meaning? Meaning Sophia was working class, authentic, unimpressed by wealth and status. She loved you for who you were, not what you'd achieved. But that made her a liability for a man trying to climb into elite social circles. So you positioned yourself as the alternative. I positioned myself as everything Sophia wasn't. Connected, sophisticated, able to advance your business interests without complicating your personal life with things like emotional needs or authentic connection. How did you know I'd be vulnerable to that? Because men like you always are. You spend so much energy trying to prove you belong in our world that you forget why you wanted to belong in the first place. Victoria leaned back in her chair, clearly enjoying her moment of triumph. The pregnancy was a gift we couldn't have planned better ourselves. Suddenly, you were facing real responsibility, real commitment, real demands on your time and attention. All I had to do was offer you an escape route that felt like an upgrade. And the wedding was always meant to be the moment of your destruction. I wasn't planning to actually marry you, Alexander. I was planning to humiliate you publicly in a way that would destroy your reputation and business relationships permanently. But Sophia went into labor first. Sophia's timing was perfect, better than anything I could have orchestrated. You destroying your own wedding to rush to your pregnant ex-girlfriend? The optics were devastating. You got everything you wanted without having to go through with the marriage. I got more than I wanted. Your public humiliation was so complete that no investor in the world will trust you with their money now. Alexander absorbed the full scope of Victoria's manipulation, the calculated seduction, the artificial relationship, the systematic destruction of his business empire. But instead of feeling devastated, he felt something unexpected: gratitude. Victoria, can I tell you something? What? Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you for destroying my life. Thank you for showing me what I'd become. Thank you for making the choice between image and integrity so clear that even I couldn't miss it. Victoria's triumphant expression wavered slightly. You're having some kind of breakdown. I'm having some kind of breakthrough. You see, you've spent months manipulating me based on who you thought I was. But it turns out That person was someone I never should have become in the first place. Alexander, the man you seduced and destroyed? He was a terrible father and a worse partner. He valued status over love, success over presence, image over integrity. You didn't destroy someone worth saving. Then why are you thanking me? Because destroying that man gave me the chance to become someone better. Alexander stood, leaving the legal documents and signed on the table. I need 24 hours to consider your offer. You have until noon tomorrow. After that, the offer expires and you can take your chances with bankruptcy court. Understood. As Alexander prepared to leave, Victoria called after him. Alexander, you do realize you're throwing away your last chance to salvage anything from this disaster. No, Victoria. I'm throwing away my last chance to salvage something that was never worth saving in the first place. That evening, Alexander sat in the NICU beside his children's incubators, contemplating Victoria's offer while watching 3 tiny chests rise and fall with steadying breath. The soft beeping of monitors provided a rhythmic soundtrack to his thoughts. $80 million would be enough to start over, to build a smaller but stable life for himself and his children. It would mean accepting defeat, acknowledging that his 20-year climb to the top of Manhattan real estate had been undone by a single strategic manipulation, but it would also mean financial security for his family. On the other hand, refusing the offer and filing for bankruptcy would mean losing everything anyway, but on his own terms rather than Victoria's. You look like you're carrying the weight of the world, said Dr. Williams, checking on the babies during her evening rounds. Feels like it. How are you holding up? It's been a difficult few days. I'm losing everything. My business, my reputation, probably my family. Are you? What do you mean? Dr. Williams gestured to the 3 incubators where his children slept peacefully, their vital signs strong and steady. Looks to me like you found everything that actually matters. They'd be better off without me. Their mother certainly would be. Why do you say that? Because I'm a selfish man who put business before family. Because I abandoned them when they needed me most. Because I chose a fake relationship over a real one. And yet you're here now. Too late. Is it? These children are going to need their father for the next 18 years. Sophia is going to need a partner to help raise triplets. The question isn't whether you made mistakes. You did. The question is what you're going to do now. Alexander looked at his daughter, who had been consistently the strongest of the 3. As if sensing his attention, she opened her tiny eyes and seemed to look directly at him with the serious expression that would become her trademark. She's beautiful, he whispered. They all are. And they all need you to be the man they deserve, not the man you used to be. I don't know if I can be that man. Then learn. Every parent learns on the job, Mr. Hawthorne. The difference is whether you're present for the learning or whether you're too busy with other things to pay attention. Dr. Williams continued her examination of the babies while talking. You know what I've observed in 15 years of NICU medicine? The families that thrive after crisis aren't the ones with the most money or the best resources. They're the ones where the parents show up consistently, day after day, putting their children's needs first. But what about providing for them? What about their future security? Children need security, but not the kind you buy with money. They need the security of knowing their parents are reliable, present, and committed to their well-being. Even if that parent is a failure in every other area of life. Especially then. Some of the best fathers I've known have been men who lost everything else and discovered that being a parent was the only job that really mattered. That night, Alexander made 2 phone calls that would determine the direction of his life. The first was to Michael Torres. Michael, I want you to file for bankruptcy protection tomorrow morning. Alexander, that will destroy your reputation permanently. You'll never be able to raise capital again at this level. Good. I don't want to raise capital again at this level. What about the Ashford offer? 80 million is better than nothing. 80 million is the price of letting Victoria Ashford by my surrender. I'd rather have nothing and keep my dignity. So what's the plan? Liquidate everything in an orderly fashion. Pay back as much debt as possible to the creditors who believed in us. And walk away with whatever's left. That might be nothing. Then I'll start with nothing. I've done it before. Alexander, are you sure about this? Once we file for bankruptcy, there's no going back. Your business reputation will be finished. My business reputation is already finished. The question is whether it dies with dignity or with humiliation. Okay, I'll have the paperwork ready first thing tomorrow morning. The second call was to Sophia's room. Alexander, is everything okay? Maria answered, her voice concerned. Everything's fine. Is Sophia awake? She is. Hold on. Alexander. Sophia's voice was still weak, but clearer than it had been since the birth. I wanted to tell you something. Tomorrow morning, I'm filing for bankruptcy. I'm going to lose everything. The business, the money, the properties, all of it. Oh, Alexander. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. I'm not. What do you mean? I mean I built an empire on the wrong foundation. I was so focused on proving I was successful that I forgot to be present for the people who actually mattered. What will you do? Start over. Find work that allows me to be the father our children deserve. Learn to measure success by whether I'm present for bedtime stories instead of whether I'm closing million-dollar deals. Alexander, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Not for you. Not for our relationship, but for them. They deserve a father who chooses them first, every time, without hesitation. Sophia was quiet for a moment. What about us? What about our relationship? There is no us right now. There's you recovering from nearly dying, and there are 3 babies who need both their parents to be healthy and present. Everything else can wait. And later, if you're willing, I'd like the chance to earn your trust again. Not as the billionaire CEO who was too important to be present for his family, but as Alexander Hawthorne from Queens, who wants to learn how to be a father. That might take a long time. Then I'll wait a long time. The next morning, Hawthorne Enterprises filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The news sent shockwaves through Manhattan real estate circles and provided the final punctuation mark on Alexander's public humiliation. But for the first time in weeks, Alexander felt free. The bankruptcy proceedings were brutal but swift. Alexander lost everything: the penthouse, the hotels, the office buildings, even his personal assets beyond a basic living allowance. After legal fees and creditor payments, he walked away with $47,000 and a 10-year-old pickup truck he'd bought for construction site visits years earlier. He rented a small 2-bedroom apartment in Astoria, Queens, 15 minutes from Sophia's family home, where she was recovering with the triplets. It was a far cry from his former penthouse, but it felt more like home than anywhere he'd lived in years. The apartment came furnished with basics: a couch that had seen better days, a kitchen table with mismatched chairs, a bed that was comfortable enough. Alexander bought a crib for the second bedroom, hoping that someday he might be trusted enough to have his children stay overnight. It's not much, he told Maria when she came to inspect his new living situation, but it's clean and safe. Sophia wants to know if you have enough money for groceries. I found a job. Construction management for a small firm in Long Island City. It's not glamorous, but it pays enough to support a family. Alexander, you went from billionaire to construction worker in 6 weeks. And I've never slept better. It was true. The crushing pressure of managing a billion-dollar empire, the constant stress of investor relations and deal negotiations, the exhausting work of maintaining an image that required him to be on every moment, all of it was gone. In its place was the simple rhythm of honest work. He left for the construction site at 7 a.m., spent 8 hours solving practical problems and managing real projects, and was home by 6 p.m. with no emails to answer, no emergency calls to take, no business dinners that kept him away from his family. How are you adjusting to working with your hands again? Sophia asked during one of his daily visits to see the children. Better than I expected. It's satisfying in a way that boardroom meetings never were. Even though you're making a fraction of what you used to make. Especially because I'm making a fraction of what I used to make. Turns out I don't need much money to be happy. I just need enough. The triplets were thriving in the Martinez family home. At 3 months old, they had developed distinct personalities that delighted Alexander every time he visited. Sophia Elena was the serious one, studying everything with intense concentration before deciding whether to approve. She rarely cried, but when she did, it was with great indignation at whatever had offended her sense of order. Miguel Alexander was the charmer, smiling at everyone who paid attention to him, and seeming to understand that his natural charisma could get him anything he wanted. He was the first to sleep through the night, and the first to laugh out loud. David Carmen was the sensitive one, quick to tears, but equally quick to comfort. He studied faces intently, as if trying to understand the emotions of everyone around him. He was also the most physically affectionate, relaxing completely when held close. They're each so different. Alexander marveled one evening as he helped with feeding time. Just like they were in the womb, Sophia replied, expertly managing 2 bottles while Alexander handled the third. Sophia was always the active one, Miguel was the acrobat, and David was the one who would settle down when I talked to him. You can tell all that from before they were born. Mothers know their children before they meet them. I missed all of that. The pregnancy experience, learning their personalities, being part of the anticipation. Yes, you did. The simple acknowledgement hurt, but Alexander was learning to accept responsibility for his choices without expecting immediate forgiveness. Can I ask you something, Sophia? Always. Do you think they'll ever forgive me for not being there when they were born? Alexander, they're 3 months old. They don't know you weren't there. What they'll know is whether you're here going forward. And you? Will you ever forgive me? Sophia was quiet for a long moment, focusing on burping Miguel while considering her answer. I'm working on it. Some days are easier than others. What makes the difference? Consistency. Every day you show up, every evening you help with feedings, every time you choose to be here instead of somewhere else, it helps. And what makes it harder? Remembering how alone I felt during the pregnancy, how scared I was during the delivery, how you chose another woman over our family. I'm sorry, I know you're sorry. But sorry doesn't erase what happened. Sorry is just the beginning. Alexander was learning that rebuilding trust was harder than building a business empire. In business, results were measurable, profit margins, market share, asset values. In relationships, progress was slower, less visible, and entirely dependent on the willingness of the other person to believe in change. What do I need to do to prove I've changed? Nothing dramatic, nothing grand. Just show up. Every day. For them. For me. For the family we're trying to figure out how to be. For how long? However long it takes. 6 weeks into this new routine, Alexander faced his first real test. Sophia developed a fever that spiked to 103 degrees, requiring an emergency room visit and overnight observation at the hospital. I can't reach my mother, and Maria is working a double shift, Sophia said when she called Alexander at work. I need someone to watch Miguel and David while I take Sophia to the hospital. I'm leaving work now. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Alexander, you don't have to. Yes, I do. They're my children too. Alexander left his construction site without hesitation, drove to Queens in record time, and spent the next 18 hours caring for 2 babies while Sophia sat in the hospital with their daughter. It was his first time alone with Miguel and David for an extended period, and he quickly discovered that caring for 2 3-month-olds simultaneously was exponentially harder than helping with feedings when other adults were present. Why are you both crying at the same time? He asked the babies during a particularly challenging 2 a.m. feeding. We can't all have a breakdown right now. But somehow he managed. He figured out feeding schedules, diaper changes, and the specific techniques that comforted each child. When Sophia returned the next evening with a healthy Sophia, she found Alexander asleep on the couch with both boys sleeping peacefully on his chest. How did it go? She asked quietly, not wanting to wake anyone. Hard, but good. They're amazing kids. Even when they're crying at 3 a.m., especially when they're crying at 3 a.m. and they finally stop because you figured out what they needed. Welcome to parenthood. Is this what you've been doing alone for the past 3 months? This is what I've been doing alone for the past 3 months. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I wasn't here to help. You're here now? That's what matters. It was the first time since the children's birth that Sophia had acknowledged his presence as meaningful rather than just acceptable. 2 weeks later, Alexander received a call that tested his new priorities in a different way. Mr. Hawthorne, this is Jennifer Kim from Goldman Sachs. We have a client who's interested in discussing a potential partnership with you for a new real estate venture. I think you have the wrong person. I'm not in real estate anymore. Sir, we understand about the bankruptcy, but our client is specifically interested in your expertise and vision. He's prepared to offer substantial backing for the right opportunity. How substantial? Initial funding of $50 million, with potential expansion to $200 million based on performance. Alexander felt the familiar surge of excitement, the adrenaline rush of a major business opportunity. For a moment, he could see it all, a new empire, a comeback story, vindication for everything he'd lost. What would be required? Full-time commitment, extensive travel for the first year, and relocation to either Los Angeles or Miami for better access to emerging markets. Relocation? The client feels that Manhattan real estate is too saturated, too controlled by established interests. He wants to build something new in markets with more opportunity. Alexander looked around his small apartment, thought about his construction job, his daily visits with his children, the slow progress he was making in rebuilding Sophia's trust. I appreciate the offer, but I'm not interested. Sir, perhaps you didn't understand the scope of what we're offering. I understood perfectly. And I'm not interested. Can I ask why? This is an extraordinary opportunity for someone in your situation. Because my situation is exactly where I want to be. That evening, he told Sophia about the offer and his decision to decline it. $50 million, she said, clearly stunned. Alexander, that's your chance to rebuild everything you lost. No, it's my chance to repeat the same mistakes that cost me everything the first time. But the money, the security for the children. The children don't need me to be rich. They need me to be present. You could be both, rich and present. Could I? Because the last time I tried to build an empire, I missed their birth and nearly lost all of you. I'm not making that mistake again. Alexander, are you sure about this? More sure than I've been about anything in years. Sophia studied his face, searching for signs of regret or resentment, finding only genuine contentment. You really have changed, haven't you? I'm trying to. Every day. I can see that. The children can see it too. They can? Miguel lights up when you walk into the room. David calms down immediately when you hold him. And Sophia? What about Sophia? Sophia studies you like she's trying to memorize your face. Like she's making sure you're really here. I'm really here. I'm not going anywhere. That night, for the first time since the children were born, Sophia asked Alexander to stay for dinner with her family. Not just to help with the babies, but to sit at the table with the Martinez family and be part of the conversation. Alexander is doing good work, Sophia's father, Roberto, said in his careful English. It's good to see man who takes responsibility. Thank you, Mr. Martinez. That means a lot coming from you. You call me Roberto. We are family now, yes. Yes, we are family. After dinner, Alexander helped clean up while Sophia put the babies down for the night. Her mother, Carmen, approached him while he was washing dishes. Mijo, can I ask you something? Of course. You are happy now? Living in small apartment, working construction, no more big business? I'm happier than I've ever been. Good. Because my daughter, she is starting to trust you again. But if you break her heart again, I won't. I swear to you, I will never hurt her or the children again. I believe you. But more important, she is starting to believe you. 9 months after the wedding disaster, Alexander was reading the financial news during his lunch break when he saw a headline that made him pause. Ashford Properties under federal investigation for securities fraud. The article detailed how Victoria and her father had been systematically manipulating property acquisitions through illegal coordination with creditors and fraudulent business practices. The wedding scandal that had destroyed Alexander's reputation had brought unwanted attention to the Ashford family's business dealings. Investigators are examining a pattern of behavior spanning nearly a decade, in which Ashford Properties allegedly coordinated with financial institutions to artificially trigger loan defaults on competing developers, then acquired the distressed properties at below-market prices. The investigation was triggered by allegations from Alexander Hawthorne, the real estate developer whose business collapsed after a highly publicized wedding scandal involving Victoria Ashford. Hawthorne claims he was the victim of an elaborate scheme designed to destroy his company for acquisition purposes. Alexander's phone rang almost immediately. Mr. Hawthorne? This is Agent Sarah Kim, FBI Financial Crimes Division. We'd like to speak with you about Victoria Ashford and the circumstances surrounding your business relationship. What kind of circumstances? Securities fraud, market manipulation, racketeering. We believe you may have been the victim of an elaborate criminal conspiracy. The meeting took place the next day at Federal Plaza in Manhattan. Alexander sat across from Agent Kim and 2 other investigators, answering detailed questions about his relationship with Victoria and the collapse of his business. Walk us through the timeline of your relationship with Ms. Ashford, Agent Kim requested. We met at a charity gala in March of last year. She approached me about potential business partnerships through her family's investment firm. Was this approach unusual? Not really. I was expanding internationally, and the Ashford family had the kind of connections that could accelerate my timeline significantly. When did the relationship become personal? About 6 weeks after our first meeting. She invited me to an investor dinner as her guest. And you were romantically involved at this point? Yes. Though I was also in a relationship with Sophia Martinez, who was pregnant with my children. Ms. Ashford knew about this other relationship. Yes. She positioned herself as someone who understood my ambitions better than Sophia did. How so? She convinced me that my personal situation, unmarried, about to become a father to triplets, would be viewed negatively by the international investors I was trying to attract. And she offered an alternative. She offered to marry me. Said it would provide the kind of stable, sophisticated image that would reassure investors about my personal judgment. Agent Kim took notes while her colleagues pulled up documents on their laptops. Mr. Hawthorne, we've been investigating the Ashford family's business practices for 18 months. Your case fits a pattern we've identified in at least 7 other instances over the past decade. What kind of pattern? Identify a successful developer who's expanding into markets they consider their territory. Seduce them into a personal relationship. Offer business partnerships contingent on personal relationships. Engineer a public scandal that destroys their reputation and triggers investor flight. Acquire their assets at bankruptcy prices. Alexander felt a chill as the agent described exactly what had happened to him. They've done this before. 7 times that we can prove. The Michael Richardson case in 2018, he was developing hotels in the Hamptons. The David Park situation in 2020, luxury residential in Tribeca. Each time, a member of the Ashford family initiated a romantic relationship, promised business partnerships, then orchestrated a public scandal that destroyed the target's reputation and financial standing. All of them lost their businesses. All of them. And in each case, Ashford Properties acquired their assets for 20 to 30 cents on the dollar. This is a business model for them. It's a criminal enterprise. What they're doing is racketeering, using fraud and intimidation to control business territories. What happens now? We're building a case for multiple federal charges. If convicted, the Ashfords could face significant prison time and be forced to divest their properties. And my lost assets. If we can prove fraud in your case, you may be entitled to substantial damages. The civil case alone could recover most of what you lost. Alexander thought about the irony. He might recover financially from the very betrayal that had cost him everything, but also taught him what truly mattered. Agent Kim, whatever damages I might be awarded, I want to set up a foundation for families dealing with medical crises, specifically parents of premature babies who can't afford extended hospital stays. That's very generous, Mr. Hawthorne. It's the right thing to do. I've learned that money is only valuable when it serves something more important than itself. The investigation moved quickly once federal resources were focused on the Ashford family's activities. Within 6 months, Victoria and her father were indicted on charges of racketeering, securities fraud, mail fraud, and conspiracy. The trial was a media sensation, with testimony from 7 different developers who had been targeted by the Ashford family's schemes. The evidence was overwhelming: recorded conversations, email trails, financial documents showing the coordinated manipulation of markets and investors. Victoria Ashford is not a socialite who made poor romantic choices, the federal prosecutor told the jury during closing arguments. She is a criminal who used sex and deception as weapons to destroy businesses and steal property. Her family's organization has operated like a mafia, using intimidation and fraud to control Manhattan real estate markets for over a decade. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Victoria Ashford was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Her father received 15 years. Their property empire was dismantled and sold, with proceeds used to compensate their victims. Alexander received a settlement of $180 million, not enough to rebuild his former empire, but more than enough to secure his family's future and fund the foundation he'd envisioned. When Sophia heard about the settlement, her reaction surprised him. "I'm glad you got justice. But more than that, I'm glad you didn't need the money to be happy." "What do you mean?" "I mean that a year ago, You would have used that money to try to rebuild your business empire, to prove that you could rise from bankruptcy and conquer the world again. And now you're using it to help other families. That tells me everything I need to know about the man you've become. On the first anniversary of their children's birth, Alexander arrived at the Martinez family home with 3 small gifts and 1 large question. The triplets, Sophia Elena, Miguel Alexander, and David Carmen, were thriving 1-year-olds, walking and starting to talk. Alexander had been present for every milestone, every doctor's appointment, every sleepless night, and joyful morning. "Happy birthday, babies," he said, distributing the wrapped presents, age-appropriate toys he'd spent weeks researching and selecting. "You didn't have to get them anything," Sophia said, but she was smiling as she watched the children explore their new toys with the serious concentration that 1-year-olds brought to everything. "I wanted to. It's been the best year of my life." "Really? Even though you're living in Queens instead of a Manhattan penthouse?" "Especially because I'm living in Queens instead of a Manhattan penthouse." Sophia looked at this man who bore little resemblance to the billionaire CEO she'd fallen in love with 3 years earlier. He was leaner now, stronger from construction work, calmer in a way that spoke of genuine contentment rather than driven ambition. His hands showed the effects of manual labor, calloused, occasionally scraped, the hands of someone who built things with his own effort rather than managing others' work. His clothes were simple, practical, bought for durability rather than image. But more than his physical transformation, it was his presence that had changed. He was fully engaged in whatever he was doing, whether it was reading bedtime stories, or helping with bath time, or simply sitting on the floor playing with blocks. "Alexander, can I tell you something?" "Always. I forgive you." The words hit him like a physical sensation, relief, gratitude, and overwhelming love flooding through him simultaneously. Really, you've spent a year proving that you've changed, that our children are your priority, that you're the man I always hoped you could be. Sophia, but that doesn't mean I'm ready to jump back into the relationship we had before. I know you're not ready for anything more than co-parenting, and that's okay. Whatever you're comfortable with is enough for me. Actually, that's not what I was going to say. Alexander looked at her curiously. "I was going to say that I'm not ready to jump back into the relationship we had before because I don't want the relationship we had before." "What do you want?" "I want something new. Something built on who we are now instead of who we were then." "Like what?" "Like dating. Like getting to know each other as parents, as the people we've become through this experience. Like building something real instead of trying to recreate something that didn't work." "You want a date?" Like normal people do. Like normal people do. Dinner, movies, conversations about our future. Getting to know each other without the pressure of billion-dollar business deals or society expectations. I'd like that very much. But Alexander, this time we do it right. No rushing, no assumptions about where it's leading. We take our time and build something that can survive whatever life throws at us. However long it takes. However long it takes. As if on cue, little Sophia toddled over to Alexander, raising her arms to be picked up. As he lifted his daughter, she looked at him with serious 1-year-old eyes and spoke her clearest word yet. "Dada." "That's right, baby girl. Dada's here. Dada's always going to be here." Miguel and David, not to be outdone, both began chanting Dada, while crawling toward him as fast as their little legs could carry them. "I think they approve of the dating plan." Sophia laughed as Alexander found himself surrounded by 3 adoring children. Best endorsement I could ask for. Their first official date was dinner at a small Italian restaurant in Astoria, followed by a walk along the East River where they talked about everything and nothing, their hopes for the children, their own dreams and fears, the lessons they'd learned from their relationship's destruction and rebuilding. "Do you miss it?" Sophia asked as they sat on a bench overlooking the Manhattan skyline. "The empire you built. I miss the security that money provided. I worry sometimes about college funds for 3 kids, about whether we'll be able to afford the bigger house we'll need eventually. But I don't miss the man I was when I had those things. I don't miss believing that success meant being too important to push a swing or read a bedtime story. Even though you're a construction foreman instead of a real estate mogul. Especially because I'm a construction foreman instead of a real estate mogul. I get to build things with my hands, solve real problems, and be home for dinner every night. And the foundation? Are you excited about that work? Alexander had used his settlement money to establish the Elena Foundation, named after his daughter, which provided support for families of premature babies. Sophia had agreed to serve as director, using her experience to help other parents navigate the terrifying world of NICU care. More excited than I ever was about real estate deals. This feels like it matters in a way that building hotels never did, because it helps people instead of just making money, because it turns our worst experience into something that helps other families, because it proves that pain can become purpose if you're willing to let it. They dated for 6 months before Alexander worked up the courage to ask the question that had been building in his heart. Sophia, will you marry me? They were sitting in the Martinez family backyard, watching the children play while her parents prepared Sunday dinner. It was the most ordinary, domestic setting imaginable, exactly where Alexander had discovered real happiness lived. Are you sure? She asked. Marriage didn't work out so well for us the first time. We weren't ready the first time. I wasn't ready. I thought marriage was about finding someone who would fit into the life I'd already built instead of building a life together. And now I know that marriage is about choosing each other every day, even when it's hard, even when other things seem more important, even when the world tells you there are better options. Is that what you're choosing? Me and the children, even when other opportunities come along. I'm choosing you and the children especially when other opportunities come along, because I've learned that nothing else matters if I don't have you. Sophia looked at this man who had lost everything and found himself in the process, who had chosen love over ambition and presence over profit. Yes, she said quietly. Yes, I'll marry you. Really, really. But this time we do it right. The ceremony was held in the backyard of the Martinez family home in Queens, with 50 guests, a mariachi band, and 3 energetic 2-year-olds who served as unofficial entertainment throughout the proceedings. Alexander wore a simple gray suit from Men's Warehouse that cost less than his former tuxedo shirts. Sophia wore her grandmother's wedding dress, carefully altered to fit perfectly and carrying more love in its hand-sewn details than any designer gown ever could. There were no society photographers documenting every moment for magazines. No elaborate floral arrangements that cost more than most people's cars. No champagne that required a sommelier to explain its provenance. Instead, there were folding chairs borrowed from the church, flowers from the local grocery store arranged by Sophia's aunts, and beer served in plastic cups alongside homemade margaritas that packed more punch than any vintage wine. It was everything their first attempt at a wedding wasn't: genuine, intimate, focused on love rather than image, surrounded by people who cared about them rather than people who cared about being seen. Do you, Alexander, take Sophia to be your wife, to love and cherish, to put her and your children before all other priorities, to choose this family every day for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, for as long as you both shall live? I do, with all my heart, with all my soul, with everything I am and everything I hope to become. Do you, Sophia, take Alexander to be your husband, to love and trust, to build a life together based on honesty and commitment, to choose this family every day for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, for as long as you both shall live? I do, completely and forever. As they kissed to seal their marriage, 3-year-old Sophia tugged on Alexander's pants leg with the persistence that had become her trademark. Dada, you married Mama now? Yes, baby girl. Dada married Mama. Good. Now we're a real family, like on TV. We were always a real family, sweetheart. Now we're just making it official. The reception was held in the same backyard, with folding tables covered in paper tablecloths, food prepared by the extended Martinez family, and music that lasted until the neighbors politely asked them to keep it down after 10 p.m. Alexander danced with his wife to At Last by Etta James, then with each of his children to whatever song happened to be playing, then with Sophia's elderly grandmother who told him in rapid Spanish that he was finally good enough for her granddaughter. What did Abuela say? Sophia asked, laughing as she watched Alexander attempt to communicate with her grandmother in broken Spanish supplemented by enthusiastic gestures. She said, I better never hurt you again, or she'll beat me with her chancla. She's serious about that. I know. I respect that. I'm actually glad you have people who will hold me accountable. even if it involves threats of physical violence from a 70-year-old woman, especially if it involves threats of physical violence from a 70-year-old woman. As the evening wound down and the children were tucked into bed, Alexander and Sophia sat on the back porch swing that her father had installed years earlier, watching the lights of Queens twinkle in the distance. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't gone into labor that day?" Sophia asked, her head resting on his shoulder. "You mean if I'd actually married Victoria?" "Yeah. If the wedding had gone as planned, if you'd gotten the business partnership, if your empire had grown instead of collapsed." Alexander considered the question seriously, looking out at the modest neighborhood that had become more home to him than any penthouse ever was. "I think I would have realized eventually that I'd made a terrible mistake. But it might have taken years, and by then, you and the children might have been gone forever. So you're grateful for the timing? For the way everything fell apart? I'm grateful for everything that led us to this moment. Even the mistakes, even the pain, even losing everything I thought I wanted. Because it taught you what you actually wanted. Because it taught me who I actually am." 8 years later, Alexander Hawthorne sat in the stands at PS 148 in Queens, watching his 11-year-old daughter Sophia perform in the school's spring concert. Beside him, Sophia held their newest addition, 3-year-old Isabella Maria, named after the grandmother who had welcomed Alexander into the family with chancellor-enforced enthusiasm. Miguel and David, now rambunctious 11-year-olds, fidgeted in their seats as they waited for their sister's turn to sing, their energy barely contained by the formal setting. "There she is," Miguel whispered loudly as Sophia stepped forward for her solo, his pride in his sister evident despite his attempt at 11-year-old coolness. "Shoo," Sophia admonished gently, but she was smiling as she recorded the performance on her phone, capturing yet another milestone in their children's lives. Alexander watched his daughter sing with confidence and joy, remembering the tiny, fragile infant who had fought for her life in the NICU 11 years earlier. All 3 of the triplets had grown into healthy, happy children with no lasting effects from their premature birth, though they each carried personality traits that had been evident from their earliest days. Sophia had become the family organizer, the one who remembered everyone's schedules and made sure nothing important was forgotten. Miguel was still the charmer, able to talk his way out of trouble and into extra dessert with equal skill. David remained the sensitive artist, creating detailed drawings and stories that captured emotions with startling accuracy. "She's got your voice," Alexander whispered to Sophia during a particularly beautiful high note. "She's got your confidence. When did I ever have confidence? When you chose us over everything else. When you walked away from that wedding to be with your family. When you decided that love was more important than image. Best decision I ever made." After the concert, the family walked to the playground where the triplets burned off energy while Alexander and Sophia sat on a bench, watching their children and talking about their day. These moments of ordinary family life had become the most precious part of Alexander's existence. "Maria called today," Sophia mentioned, referring to her sister who had moved to California and become a successful pediatric nurse. "She's getting married next month." "To the doctor?" "To the doctor. She asked if you'd walk her down the aisle, since Dad can't be there." Sophia's father had passed away 3 years earlier, and Alexander had grown so close to the Martinez family that he'd become the de facto patriarch, the one younger family members turned to for advice and support. "I'd be honored." She also mentioned that she saw Victoria in the news. "She's being released next month. After serving 7 years? Good behavior, apparently." Alexander felt no satisfaction in Victoria's downfall, no lingering anger about her manipulation. Too much good had come from the destruction she'd caused for him to hold on to resentment. "I hope she finds whatever she was looking for." Really, carrying hatred for someone who's already out of your life is like drinking poison and expecting them to die. Very wise, husband. I learned it from my very wise wife. The Elena Foundation had grown into one of the most effective organizations supporting families of premature babies, with programs in 12 cities and plans for national expansion. Sophia served as executive director, using their experience and Alexander's business skills to help hundreds of families navigate medical crises. "The board wants to expand the NICU family housing program," Sophia mentioned as they watched David carefully construct an elaborate sand castle while his siblings offered unsolicited architectural advice. What would that require? A capital campaign. Major fundraising. We'd need to raise about $5 million. Challenging, but doable. What's the timeline? 2 years. But Alexander, it would mean more visibility, more media attention. Are you comfortable with that? Alexander considered the question. 8 years ago, he would have craved the attention, the recognition, the validation that came with public success. Now, he valued privacy and the quiet satisfaction of meaningful work. If it helps more families, then yes. I'm comfortable with whatever attention serves a purpose larger than ourselves. Even if it means interviews and fundraising galas and all the things you used to love about being successful. Especially if it means those things. Because now I understand the difference between being successful and being meaningful. Daddy, Mama, come see what we built, called Sophia from the sandbox, where the 3 older children had collaborated on a sand empire that rivaled anything Alexander had ever constructed in steel and glass. Coming, Alexander called back, standing and offering his hand to help Sophia up while balancing Isabella on his hip. As they walked toward their children, Sophia squeezed his hand with the casual affection that had replaced the desperate passion of their early relationship. This love was steadier, deeper, built on years of choosing each other through both ordinary days and extraordinary challenges. Alexander, yeah, I'm proud of you. Not for the money you lost, or the empire you built, or the foundation you're running. I'm proud of the man you became when you stopped trying to impress people who didn't matter. I'm proud of us for surviving what should have destroyed us and building something real from the pieces, to the life we actually wanted instead of the life we thought we were supposed to want, to the life we actually wanted. As Alexander admired his children's sand castle masterpiece, complete with towers, moats, and detailed decorative elements that would be washed away by the next rain, he realized he had finally found what he'd been searching for his entire life. Not success as the world measured it. Not status or recognition or the approval of people who would never truly know him. Not even the kind of love that looked perfect from the outside but felt empty on the inside. He'd found home. He'd found purpose. He'd found the kind of love that chose commitment over convenience, presence over profit, and ordinary moments over extraordinary achievements. He'd found everything that actually mattered, and he'd found it by losing everything that didn't. Look, Daddy. Isabella pointed at the sandbox creation with 3-year-old excitement. Big castle. It's beautiful, sweetheart. Did you help build it? I helped. I'm a good builder. Yes, you are. The best kind of builder. What's the best kind? The kind who builds things that make people happy. As the family packed up their playground supplies and prepared to head home for Sunday dinner with the extended Martinez clan, Alexander looked back at the sandcastle that would be gone by tomorrow and smiled. Some things were worth building even if they didn't last forever. Some things were worth building especially because they didn't last forever. And some things, like family, like love, like the choice to be present for the people who mattered most, were worth building every single day, one ordinary moment at a time. If this story moved you, if it showed you something about what really matters when everything else falls away, please hit that like button and subscribe to Lux Love Chronicles. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that our greatest failures can become our most important victories, and that the best revenge against those who try to destroy us is to build something beautiful from the ruins. Remember, love isn't about having everything. It's about valuing what you have enough to fight for it when everything else disappears. Thank you for joining us on Alexander and Sophia's journey from betrayal to redemption, from empire to family, from having everything that didn't matter to having everything that does. This is Mr. Wentworth, reminding you that the greatest love stories aren't about perfect people making perfect choices. They're about flawed people learning to choose love over everything else, again and again, until they get it right. Until next time, choose what matters.